once again. I don't know what number this is, but I know that I'm Dan Schmidt. I know that he is Steve Bartylla, and I know that the man behind the scenes there is Ian Sanchez. Thank you for joining us again. Deer Talk Now is coming at you. We've been doing this podcast in one way, shape, or form since July of 2011. So that is testament to everybody out there who listens, watches, subscribes, likes, shares this content. That's all we ask you to do. And all we ask you to do is, if you can patronize our sponsors, Mossberg Wildlife Research Center, 10 Point, Hoyt Traditions, and Outdoor Edge. I'm sure they'd like it, even if you just visited their pages. Steve, thanks for joining us once again, and welcome back to Deer Talk Now.
It's my absolute pleasure, Daniel.
Steve drove an hour or plus to get here today. So we are trying to, we're going to wrangle cats. I think that's a common phrase that we use. But today, the topic we're going to talk about, Steve, do you remember, you and I are old enough to remember this phrase, "Yes, Virginia, there is a Santa Claus." Mm. That was like from the New York Times or the New York Post or something like that back way before you and I were born. But today, if we had to headline this, and we won't, Ian, please don't write this as the headline. Yes, Virginia, there is such thing as a cull buck. That is going to be the topic for you today, because I know that you've done it on properties that you've managed that, okay, we can call them a cull buck, we can call them a management buck, but for all intents and purposes is that they're in certain situations. Everybody wants to think, oh, I'm hunting cull bucks on my 20 acres. No, you're not. I mean, that just doesn't happen. But there are certain situations when you can target specific bucks to take off a property for management purposes. Please say yes.
Yeah.
Because I've done it for you, and I know that is the reason. So let's talk about that. When does it make sense for somebody who has property that is under their control to go after that kind of approach in buck hunting?
Okay. First off, I know how absolutely ridiculous this is going to sound, because in my ever so humble opinion, it is this ridiculous. We have to call them management bucks, because if we call them cull bucks, that's wrong, and we will get yelled at. I'm not really sure what the difference is between a management buck and a cull buck, but I hunt management bucks so everybody doesn't yell at me all the time. Because when I say cull bucks, oh, that's bad.
Oh, that you're just degrading.
There's not such a thing as a cull buck. Oh, okay.
Okay. What about management?
What it is, what there are, and no one in this world can convince me of any differently, is there are deer, bucks specifically, that are born with way more genetic potential than other bucks. Okay, there are bucks that are born with great genetic potential, but they get injured, and they cannot express that genetic potential. What you're trying to, by taking out management bucks, the only thing you are not trying to, you are not improving future antler inches by any stretch of the imagination. What you are doing is you are controlling the standing stock of wildlife on that property at that time.
One individual deer is what you're
exactly. Doing. And why is that important? The reason for me it's important is because every property can hold X number of bucks. That's it. They cannot hold any more. Can you do things to modify that property to get them to hold a few more? Yes, that's one of the big things I do. But you have a cap. You are not going to be able to hold more than X number of deer on this ground. When you exceed that, social stress is going to cause them to leave, to shift their area. I mean, I'm not saying they're necessarily going to abandon that as their home area, but they are not going to spend anywhere near as much time there as they're going to over here where they don't have that competition. Okay. So because we can only carry X number, I want to carry the ones that have the best genetic potential. You cannot do that in any way, shape, or form before these bucks hit 3.5 years old. Before they hit 3.5 years old, you could have a future 250-inch non-typical stud on your hands. And if he's born late as a fawn, you ain't going to see it until he hits 3.5
Might
years old.
see it when he's 3.5, right?
Right. According to our own John J. Azoga, the first 3 years of that buck's life, the antlers that are on his head, or especially the first two, have so much to do with what actually, when that deer was born, and how healthy that mother was. But by the time they hit 3.5, are they 100% caught up if they're born really late? No, they are not. Have they 100% come back to the norm if they were born at an ideal, perfect time? No. But all of a sudden, those gaps have narrowed to the point where that 110-inch 8-point with about, I don't know, 1.5-inch long brow tines, odds are he's not going to be your next 200-inch deer. Flip side, that 160-inch 3.5-year-old that's starting to kick junk already, that's got those long tines, if you want to shoot him at 3.5 years old, you want to shoot him at 2.5 years old, you want to shoot him as a legal 1.5-year-old, shoot him. But if you're trying to manage that and you want to increase the quality of the standing stock on that ground, you leave that 160-inch 3.5-year-old alone and you kill that 110-inch 3.5-year-old with those 1.5-inch long brow tie. Either, without a doubt, there are management bucks, cull bucks, whatever the heck you want to call them. But no, you're not doing squat for genetics because of, well, frankly, they've done studies in high fences over very many years, and they can barely budge the needle in a high fence. Now you talk free range, you're talking yearling buck dispersal. So that buck that's born on your ground, the odds of him actually living there are very low.
Very low.
You can do a couple things to jack him, but even when you kill the birth mother, those ants are kicking him out when he gets to be 1.5 years old, because they want to keep their gene pool more pristine. So by the time everything's said, no, you cannot impact the future genetics on your property, which, having taken advanced genetics in college, seems pretty darn bizarre to me, but study after study has shown you can't. But what you 100% can do is you can control the standing stock of the deer on that ground at any one time through your decisions on what you shoot and what you don't. You go ahead and you shoot the very best 3.5-year-olds. Guess what? Next year, your 4.5-year-olds aren't going to be anywhere near as good. You go ahead and shoot your worst 3.5-year-olds, and guess what? Odds are really, really good that your 4.5-year-olds next year are going to be better. Where
do you find it? Where do you find that breaking point for excuse me, for property size? Because everybody wants to say, oh, well, we got to take this. Number one, you already answered the question on age. 1.5 years, he's a spike, he's a fork, whatever. A 2-year-old, he's got little brow tines, doesn't tell you anything. 3-year-old, now you kind of, on your normal deer, your 8-pointers, your 10-pointers. 10-pointer, I would say probably leave him alone until he gets to be older, if that's what your goal is. Where do you see that breaking point as far as property size? Are you just peeing in the wind on a small property by even entertaining this thought? Deer Talk Now is brought to you by Hoyt Archery and the all-new Alpha X30. Compact yet forgiving, it seamlessly blends into your hunting environment, whether you're nestled in your blind, perched in a tree stand, or venturing into the backcountry. The Alpha X30 allows you to make adjustments and tailor your performance like never before with the new HBX Exact Cam. For more information, visit Hoyt.com.
I think the breaking point is it's up to each of us to figure out what we actually enjoy in this. Okay, there's a whole bunch of people out there, and there's nothing wrong with anything I'm about to say. There's a whole bunch of people out there that shooting a 1.5-year-old buck just ain't going to do it for them. Mm-hmm. It's just, it's not. There's nothing wrong with that. There's a whole bunch of people out there that shooting that 1.5-year-old buck, they're going to be thrilled as all get out. And man, there's nothing wrong with that at all, as long as it's a legal deer. Now, we have such a propensity to try to this is what I want, therefore everybody else needs to follow my wants. Heck no. You're not telling me what to do on my side of the fence. I can't tell you what to do on yours. Okay. And if I don't have to feel bad about doing legal things on my side, well, I sure don't have a right to make you look like a turd head for doing the same thing on your side.
Right.
Okay. So really what I know this is counterintuitive, but I really think the biggest deciding factor is the individual's headspace, what they want, okay, and what they can tolerate. Because I'm telling you, you're going to lose all sorts of animals, and if you go into this thinking that you're going to have a 90% success rate, an 80% success rate, a 50% success rate, unless you got stupid big acres, you're going to be extremely miffed, because there you are passing all these deer and they're jumping the fence and the neighbor's killing them, or they're getting hit by a car, or they're dying because they had a little crack in their skull when they got in a fight and bacteria's gotten it. I mean, there are so many reasons these deer die, it ain't even funny.
Wow, we could talk about cranial abscess disease for about a half a day, because that's what happens in Texas when they really try to manage this. It's like, you know what? I always say this is God saying, yep, you want a card? There you go. Boom. There's the Joker. I'm throwing this down right there because you just tried to really manipulate this population, and now you've got all these mature bucks.
And the bugger of it is I don't care what we're talking about. I don't care if we're talking knitting, for crying out. I don't care if we're talking collecting Beanie Babies. As ridiculous as that
Did you
sounds
do that?
to us. I did not. I had an aunt that did. Well, actually, it was Precious Moments. But yeah, that sounds ridiculous to me. It sounds ridiculous to you. It probably sounds ridiculous to most listeners. But if you honestly care about that, the more you invest in collecting precious moments, the more important that becomes. And if you can't handle disappointment, it can drive you nuts. I mean, I'll be brutally honest with you. I shouldn't share this, but I almost beat up a 60-some-year-old marshmallow that had nothing to do. He said something stupid about the deer I shot. It had nothing to do with it. It had to do with watching EHD wipe out my entire mature buck class after putting so dang much effort into this. And then gone.
Is that the one where I was at camp with you?
You were not
in the cooler.
You weren't there when I almost.
But no, was that the deer?
Yeah.
Okay, I remember. We're not going to name names or point fingers or any of that kind of stuff, but I remember that.
Oh,
I remember it.
It was flat out embarrassing.
Yeah, I remember
how I lost my snot.
Okay, Deer Talk Now podcast. We're talking with Steve Bartylla. We're talking about yes, Virginia, there is a such thing as a cull buck. Brought to you by Mossberg, 10 Point, Wildlife Research. Just check out these companies. Go to their websites. They have great new products. Outdoor Edge has some really cool knives, but I'm not going to get into that right now. Steve, so we're talking about you would not give me an answer on the reality of property size. Hang on a second. For me, I would say, like you said, do what you want to do, but don't, excuse me, don't fool yourself into thinking, if you want an excuse to kill a buck, by all means, bless your heart, kill that deer. But we always say a 40 or an 80 acres, if I'm holding hope that by killing that 3.5-year-old buck with short brow tines, is that really going to affect anything on my property if I do it? That's my question. Is other than, like I said, if I want an excuse, fine, I'll make any excuse I want to kill him. But is that really going to make any difference on a small property?
Yes and no. Yes, from the standpoint that I went ahead and managed a 5,000 acre piece that hadn't been hunted in 6 years. And you think to yourself, wow, the bucks, it was all a bunch of gross old stuff. And the very best young stuff, it will leave because it can't compete. The way I see it, antler growth is nothing but the simplest darn math problem. Energy consumed, subtract the energy it takes to live, grow, and survive. What's left over goes to the rack. Okay. Well, those 110-inch, 120, 130-inch, 5.5-year-old bucks, guess what they got? They got bodies, boy. Because that energy, it's going into their bodies. It ain't going into their racks. That 160, 170-inch deer, generally speaking, same age, all else equal, is going to have a smaller body. So it tends to be your big, nasty deer the ones that we quote unquote trophy hunters. I'm not a trophy hunter, but
I don't know any trophy hunters personally,
but what we trophy hunters, all we care about is that big. Well, I can tell you, you leave a property for 5 years, you probably don't have much for big stuff. So on that 20, shooting that 110-inch, 3.5-year-old bully, and actually, if he is preventing the other deer from being there, yes, it can make a difference for you. It can. At the same time, I'll be brutally honest with you, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, but if you're managing ground, anything, and it's got to be a special 500-acre piece, the problem with saying how many acres is every single property is different.
Oh,
that's why all these cookie cutter management approaches don't work. Well, don't work as well as they could, potentially could, because every single property is different. I've been on 500-acre properties that can't hold the deer. I've been on 50-acre properties that can hold a heck of a lot more deer than that 500-acre. So it's impossible to come up with that number, but at the same time, if you're not talking about 500 plus acres of truly quality cover, you're not really raising deer.
Right.
Okay. And that's okay. You don't have to. Right. You don't have to do
I think
any
that's
of this.
probably the point I wanted to get across, is the fact that as so many people, I would say the preponderance of our listeners are hunting pressured deer.
Oh, yes.
And so that even thought of, I can like manipulate this somehow, is pretty foreign.
About the only thing you can do is manipulate the standing stock of deer on that ground. Come into it with that understanding, and then you have to build your understanding. Okay, how can I manipulate it? Well, about the only way when it comes to bucks, about the only way most people can is by deciding not to shoot this deer, which he still may be killed, and this is the one I want to shoot. And by want, I'm not saying necessarily this is the one I want. This is the one that's going that I want to remove for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. Lots of times when you've been hunting with me, it's been because, it's a 4.5-year-old 110-inch deer, and we've got 3.5-year-old studs.
And you want those out of there, and I'd happily shoot them. Yeah, no, that's exactly, and that's where I've seen it in play, which is where we came up the whole idea for Deertopia, is like, if you have, number one, it's like, this is how it could work in an almost perfect situation, but there's certain things that you can take from that perfect situation to improve your situation, no matter what your situation is. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, Deer Talk Now podcast brought to you by Traditions. Have you seen the new Nitro Bolt? That thing is pretty cool. Brand new muzzleloader. Hoyt Mossberg Wildlife Research Center, 10-point, so many other products that I could mention there. Steve, let me end this episode with, this is a bonus question, nothing to do with cull bucks. Again, this is a bonus question for Steve. Before I give him that, wherever you're listening to this podcast or watching this podcast, the video versions, like and subscribe. That's all we do. Ask you to do. I tried to pin you on property sizes. This is a general question, a standalone question. What, in your opinion, is considered a small deer hunting property?
First, I think actually asking questions like that is pretty key, because I find we all just insert our own answers otherwise. To me, a real world property is anything under 600 acres. If it's over 600 acres, I'm sorry, where I grew up, people I knew didn't have 700-800 acres, 1,000 acres. So that's just the way I grew up. So anything under 600 acres to me is a real world property. If it's over 600 acres, it's stupid big. And I like stupid big. To me, a small property is probably a 120 or less. But I'll tell you what, there's some 5-acre properties out there that hunt like a dream. There's not many. When you're talking, the smaller your property gets, the more 100% under the control you are of what's going on around you. The larger the property that you control is, the more you can assert a little bit of control. But even, I said the largest I think was 7,000, and even that, I lost deer every year to neighbors that I didn't want to lose. Just not as many. Because some of them, when you're talking 7,000, the ones that are actually in the center, they don't leave much. But
so we're gonna put it at 120 acres, and and you only get to give me one answer here. This is gonna be the final answer, final question on this topic. 120 acres or less. What is one thing that I can do as a deer hunter / manager? One thing that I can do to make that property better.
I'm going to cheat and give you two. One, hunt it like
I knew he was going to do that.
Hunt at low impact. You can hunt the heck, and the smaller the property is, the more important this is, because you have limited, less and less options. As long as that deer does not see you, as long as that deer does not hear you, as long as that deer does not smell you while you're there, and for the 24 to 72 hours that your odors remain, depending on the conditions after you leave, as long as that doesn't occur, you weren't there. Perception is reality for whitetails every bit as much as it is for humans. The smaller your property, get off your tails and make low impact stands. Low impact stands happen, high odds low impact stands happen exceedingly rarely. Very rarely naturally. That 7,000 acre, there was 2 of them on the entire place. By the time I was done, there was probably close to 100. But you have to manufacture them. Make it so that you have a safe wind. Make it so you have a safe entrance and safe exit. You do that by going out and scouting and finding all the places you can get to and hunt, and then you select the ones that make the most sense and jack them. Hunt smart, and then identify. The next biggest thing is, it's actually a twofer, but identify what your small property can do and maximize it. If you have buck bedding on it, that's probably all you're going to have. And now I'm talking a 20, not 110. 120 acre property is different. But when you're talking very limited acreage, 40 or less, maybe even a 50, 60, depending on you're going to be able to either set this up as a bedding area, you're going to be able to set it up as a food source, or you're going to be able to set it up as a transition zone. Figure out which ones is already occurring and put that on steroids in a way that works best for you.
Awesome answer, and thank you for elaborating. Okay, that's it for this episode. We're going to remind you guys every Thursday, brand new episodes. And then Steve is the host of the Deertopia TV show on Pursuit Channel. Check that out. Saturday Night Deer Camp is going to be starting up here again for the new episodes. And then everything's online. So if you want to see old episodes plus Steve's video series, the Hunt 'em Big and Grow 'em Big series, which are also going on 14 years. I don't know if you knew that. 14 years on both of those series. Both of those, our website, deeranddeerhunting.com, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, you name it. For Steve Bartylla, I am Dan Schmidt and Ian Sanchez. We welcome you back again here next Thursday for another brand new episode of Deer Talk Now. The Deer Talk Now podcast is brought to you by Mossberg, Wildlife Research Center, Traditions Firearms, Outdoor Edge Knives, Hoyt Archery, and 10 Point Crossbows.